everyone. Welcome to session 3G at the Texas Conference on Digital Libraries. My name is Emily Johnson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Scholarly Communication Librarian at the University of Texas at San Antonio. And I'm a member of the TCDL Planning Committee. I'm pleased to be your session moderator today. First, some housekeeping. Texas Digital Library and the TCDL Planning Committee are dedicated to providing an experience for everyone that is free from all forms of harassment and inclusive of all peoples. We ask that everyone here today be considerate and respectful in speech and action, attempt collaboration before conflict, refrain from demeaning, discriminatory, or harassing behavior in speech, and be mindful of your environment and of your fellow participants. You can also view our code of conduct on the homepage of the conference. This session will run until approximately 2:50 p.m. Please feel free to take breaks as you need. I invite you to say hello in the chat and let us know where you're joining from, share resources, and make comments throughout today's lightning talks. You are also encouraged to post your questions in the Q&A section, where you can also vote on other questions you'd like our speakers to answer. I'll be watching through questions in the Q&A and we'll share them with our speakers during a Q&A at the end. So we're going to do Q&A for the whole thing at the end. So now we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm pleased to introduce our first speakers, Alexa Height and Bruce Herbert. I'm going to hand things over to you guys to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. I am hopefully now sharing my screen. Awesome. Okay, so hello, my name is Alexa Height. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Scholarly Communication Librarian at TAMUCC. This lightning talk is a shortened version of a panel presentation that Christy Park, the director of TDL, Bruce Herbert, here with me today from College Station, and myself presented with input from the entirety of the OJS User Group at the Library Publishing Forum earlier this month. The goal of this lightning talk is to share what the OJS User Group is and how we've collectively benefited from it. We know TDL supports various user groups. We are not the first, but we'd like to highlight the work we've done over the past year-ish. Hopefully you will all maybe want to join the OJS user group at the end or be inspired to start additional user groups that can benefit TDL members. I know that our wonderful moderator, Emily, will give us some information about a potential new group at the end of our session today. In our original presentation, Christy gave an overview of what TDL has to offer in terms of services. Since we're all here at TCDL and the TDL Services Rodeo was earlier today, and they went over everything TDL is doing, I'm going to skip that and kind of get into the details of OJS specifically. So this slide here is an overview of the OJS services TDL has to offer. This slide kind of goes into all of the journals that TDL hosts through OJS. There are currently 75 journals at 13 different institutions. There are large flagship universities and ARL libraries like College Station and Texas Tech, but also smaller and or less well-resourced institutions within systems or that operate independently. So the TDL OJS model, there are 3 stakeholder groups working together to support the success. There's the TDL staff, the member library, in this case on this page, that's Texas A&M College Station, and then the journal's editorial and management team consisting of staff and faculty at A&M and other institutions. So TDL provides hosting and technical support for the journal. This includes providing help desk support directly to users of each journal site. Member institutions provide another important layer of support, serving as liaisons between the TDL and the editorial team and providing additional services at their discretion. And then the journal's editorial and management team, they are the hands-on folks who manage the day-to-day tasks in OJS of managing the journal's content, policy, and workflows. All 3 of these groups obviously must be working well together for a journal to be successful. So this slide is just a little bit more detail. TDL is responsible for hosting and help desk, but also financial support to PKP, member discounts on data site DOIs, coordination of OJS user group. Member libraries are the crucial and flexible middle layer. So at minimum, we're the service contact for TDL. We liaise with our journal teams, but there's also a wide range of additional support and services that we can provide. So the OJS user group itself, it kind of came out of, I was new to my university, my institution, and I was new to OJS. And I asked Christy, hey, is there like a group I can talk to? Because we don't have policies and I'm wondering what other institutions are doing. And she said, let's start a user group, which has been great. So we created our charter and mission. We have an organizational structure. It's very loose and informal. Our membership is limited to TDL members and members, the library liaisons. And we kind of created, we had a plan as to what we wanted to accomplish. So we had some goals. Obviously, we wanted to learn more about OJS 3. We used our content calendar and we had our monthly meetings, 1 hour via now Zoom, to learn about OJS, and we had discussion topics and speakers. We were able to, crowdsource using all the expertise from our various librarians and library staff in order to, learn from each other. We also wanted to create 2 toolkits for journal managers, one on decision making and one on starting a new journal. And this actually became one toolkit that Bruce and his team at College Station really did the bulk work of, but it was really a great way to have a blueprint for faculty who are like really gung-ho about wanting to start a journal, but they maybe didn't realize how much work it would take to sustain it. So this is kind of like, here's everything that you are asking to get yourself into. And that's been very helpful for folks. So like I mentioned, we would have monthly meetings. Most of our speakers were OJS group members. We had Laura Waugh, who is also presenting today. She did an excellent presentation on ORCID, and we had some questions that she was unfortunately not able to find, so she brought in a guest speaker, and it was wonderful. And we also had another guest speaker, a faculty an editor of a journal at UT Austin, and they joined us for a case study. They were talking about their use on their campus, and one of our library managers at another institution said, hey, so I have some faculty managers who are interested in kind of a similar network that we have. So we are OJS librarians and library staff, but we've created a listserv for those journal managers. So they have their own network, because they were saying, yeah, we're working in a silo and we look at other journals as our competitors, and we'd like that, that mutual support. So far we've only created a listserv for them, but we do hope to work more on creating how we can support them more. So that is all I have today, and pretty much all I have time for, but we are going to be here to answer any questions that you all might have when it comes to the Q&A. I'm gonna stop sharing. Nope, that's not the right button. Sorry, y'all.
Great, thank you, Alexa. Okay, so our next, and again, if you have any questions for our presenters, we're going to do Q&A at the end. So be sure to put your questions in chat on Whova or hold on to them, and we can do that at the end. Okay, so moving on, our next presentation, I'm going to hand it over to Lauren Coe, Mary Manning, and Katie Rojas.
Today we're presenting on collaborating to build web archives in Texas. Presenting today are Lauren Coe, Mary Manning, and Katie Rojas. Web Archiving Texas was formed in November 2019 with the purpose to build community around web archiving in Texas. We have quarterly meetings and anyone is welcome to join. In February of 2020, we established a working group to avoid duplication and to encourage collaborative collection building. Our charge is to explore how WATEX can improve collective efforts in Texas and avoid duplication of effort. To date, we have created an index of Texas web collections, distributed a survey on web archiving in Texas, explored Cobweb and UNT tools. The spreadsheet that we created was primarily from archives found online. We included institutions and their web archives. This allowed us to see similar collecting focuses, provided a snapshot in time, and can be updated annually through a more automated method. From our results, we found that university websites, COVID-19, and LGBTQ collections were very prevalent. However, there were also a lot of different collections. A lot of one-offs, like the cyber cemetery or renewable energy in Texas. Now I'm going to turn it over to Katie Rojas, who's going to talk about our survey.
So we created a survey to find out who in Texas was collecting web content, what were they collecting, and how was it being collected. If you're a Texas institution and you have not taken our survey yet, we would love to hear from you, even if you're not currently web archiving. Next, we gathered 17 responses, 3 of whom we're not collecting yet, but we're planning to, and the earliest capture date was 1996. You can see the different types of positions that people hold, all the way from digital archivists to directors or managers or university archivists, a very diverse group of people who are collecting web archives in Texas. We also asked about tools that people are using to collect web archives. So obviously Archiveit is the most prevalent one, but several other institutions are overlapping use with tools like Browser or Heritrix. Here's a geographic representation of where the survey respondents are from. You can see that most of them are in the major metropolitan areas of Texas, and we do have some gaps. So if you're from one of these areas that you don't see a response for here, like the Panhandle or Far East Texas or something like that, we would love to hear from you. And the collecting scopes that were reported to us were predominantly university or institutional records, but there was a lot of other subjects that people are collecting on, such as COVID-19. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren next, who will talk about our next steps.
Okay, moving forward, where do we want to go and how can we get there? We have some goals for through 2022. Number 1 is to keep up to date on what institutions are collecting, hopefully in an automated manner, and to test pilot a collaborative collection. For this, we will pick a topic and a scope for a collection that we want to build, determine which institutions want to participate in the collection, and determine what tools and workflows we'll use to access and build the collection. We want to do this because we see that there are benefits to collaborative collection building. Some of these benefits are sharing the storage burden and crawling resources, especially for institutions that don't have any crawling resources, and staffing, because a lot of web archiving staff are only doing it part-time. Another benefit is greater input from more and diversified curators to fill collection gaps in underrepresented areas, which will also allow us to overall gather more content and have greater coverage. This will allow us to better serve patron research needs in cases where institutions are focusing on content tied to their institution or their local geographic area. This could better expand what they have available. Building a collaborative collection would also be an avenue for institutions that don't yet have a web archiving program to help shape a collection, and then to use that collection as a product to gain buy-in from management for adding a web archiving program. Next. So once we determine what we're going to be crawling, we'll need to determine how we'll be building the collection and how we'll provide access. One option would be to pull existing work files from participating institutions' existing collections and put them in one shared storage space with one single access point. We could also have one institution run crawling tools and also host the content, but be crawling all of the nominated URLs from participating institutions. Another option would be to share a new archived account that we specifically have for the purpose of building collaborative collections. Thank you for listening, and you can see our contact information if you'd like to get in touch.
Great, thank you. Okay, so moving right along, we're going to move on to our third presentation, and I'm happy to turn it over to Sarah Potvin and Wendy Casper.
Can you see this?
We can see it, yeah.
Okay, great. I'm doing like a too many monitors situation.
We all understand the struggle.
Okay, so thanks so much for having us here today. I will be presenting findings from, I'm Sarah Potvin. I'll be presenting findings from a study that Wendy Arendt Casper and I have been conducting as part of a larger interest in forging a public service agenda for research libraries. And we hope to have more formal publications to share soon. We're just about to submit an article, but today we're releasing all of the spoilers. We're sharing one of our biggest initial findings from our study of open access policy adoption in United States land grants. You can still see it? Okay, great. So we went into this study with clear assumptions and hypotheses, founded, provisioned, or incorporated under an appeal to both educational access and economic development. Land grant universities are widely perceived to have created more accessible, practical educational opportunities and to have advanced the national economy at a crucial moment. As the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities claims, the act that established land grants in every US state and territory was, quote, intended to provide a broad segment of the population with a practical education that had direct relevance to their daily lives, with land grant institutions assuming the responsibility to steward teaching, extension, and research efforts that benefited the broader public. So given the public mission and the public emphasis of land grants, we anticipated that many land grant institutions in the United States had passed institution level open access policies mandating public access to the research output from their universities. I'm not going to go as much into OA because I'm going to assume that the TCDL attendees are already immersed in that world, but these missions seemed aligned. So let's take a closer look and see how that played out. So land grants in the United States were founded through 3 successive acts. The original 1862 Morrill Act provisioned public lands, which were expropriated from indigenous populations, to states for the establishment of at least one college dedicated to agriculture, engineering, military training, and to a much lesser degree, liberal arts. And at their founding, many of the 1862 land grants limited enrollment to white men. Subsequent land grant acts in 1890 and 1994 addressed racial segregation in the land grants by prioritizing education for Black and Indigenous people, extending land grant status and funding to historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, and tribal colleges and universities, TCUs. Even as these acts prioritized those excluded by the 1862 institutions, it institutionalized their exclusion. The 1890 Act, which provisioned additional federal funding to states for land grants from the sale of public lands, was an intentional effort to spur educational access for Black Americans barred from Southern land grants by segregationist admission policies. Ooh, speed reading these words. But rather than mandating the repeal of these discriminatory policies, the act actually allowed Southern states to maintain whites-only land grants and designated separate institutions to serve Black students. So this is why there are 2 land grants in Texas still, Texas A&M and Prairie View A&M. With the Equity and Educational Land Grant Status Act of 1994, the federal government established endowment funds and appropriations for then 29, now extended to 35, tribal colleges and universities, with funds targeted to agricultural science, educational enhancements, extension programming, that's really the outreach arm of the land grants, and capital facilities. So institutional open access policies, as TCDL attendees likely know, demonstrate a real commitment by any given institution to ensure that research produced by affiliated scholars is publicly available and accessible. As Peter Suber notes in his open access chapter dedicated to nonprofit institutions, both public funding agencies and universities have pursued work to encourage open access adoption, recognizing that public access is both a public good, something that serves larger society, and an opportunity to extend the influence and impact of the institution and funder and glean a citation advantage. So there's often language here around disseminating the fruits. That's one of the most common phrases we see across policies. And the idea is propagation of ideas. As Suber wrote now almost 10 years ago in this chapter, institutions are in an unparalleled position to influence author decisions. So we started our investigation by identifying institutions with open access policies, and we did so through a range of different sources. We looked at MIT Library's list of open access policies adopted by US institutions. We looked through the Coalition of Open Access Policy Institutions listings hosted through SPARC, the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Coalition. We went through the voluminous entries in the Registry of Open Access Repository Mandates and Policies, and we also went to every land-grant institutional website to try to identify any evidence of open access policy adoption or interest. And our criteria when identifying policies was to determine whether they were structured as mandates, which seem to require compliance, or resolutions that merely signal support. And in actuality, I would say the distinction between mandates and resolution is somewhat obscured by the enforcement mechanism or lack thereof for mandates. That's a different question and conversation. And we limited our analysis to those with institution level policies. So a number of universities have passed unit level policies. For example, a library might pass a policy for open access publishing that only applies to others in the library rather than the whole university. And for this study, we just looked at institutional level policies. So there's an interrobang there. We found that only 13 of the 112 land grants have passed institution level open access policies. Those are listed here on the slide. And an additional 4 have passed resolutions. So just to clarify, these are mandates and these are resolutions. Every institution who passed a policy, whether a mandate or a resolution, was ranked by Carnegie as an R1 or an R2. So these are high research activity universities. All are in the top quintile for research and development expenditures. And all are in the top quintile for Leiden rankings, which signals a strong uptake of open access rather than more of a policy adoption motivation. You're actually seeing a wider quantity of open access publications out of these schools. And then within this, of the 17 land-grant universities with OA policies, only 5 explicitly reference their land-grant status within the policy and point to that as a motivation for adopting open access policies. So in total, only 11% of the land grants had passed institutional open access policies. But if we limit our sample to those 1862 original Morrill Act land grants, that number jumps to 22%. So one finding that really stood out to us was that 100% of the institutional OA policy adoption among land grants was in that original 1862 group, and not a single historically Black college or university or tribal college or university has passed an institutional policy. We're going to be pursuing these findings through a number of collaborations lined up over the summer, but we're also curious about your thoughts on this issue. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so we are moving on to presentation number 4. So I'll hand it over to Todd Peters, Laura Watt, Aaron Mazzi, and Jason Long.
Hello, I'm Todd Peters, and I'm going to talk about a project at Texas State University to add older theses to our online repository. We're working with 6,000 print theses, which are second copies and can be disbound and rapidly scanned through a sheet feed scanner. Texas State has had an institutional repository since 2004. Our first repository was with BE Press in the cloud, but we currently have a DSpace repository on campus. We contracted with Atmire to install and maintain the repository. The university has used Vireo for electronic submission for several years, which includes a release for publication online. The first hurdle we had to tackle was the lack of permissions to publish older theses online. We only started gathering electronic rights when we implemented our institutional repositories. The copyright officer worked with Texas State system attorneys for a solution. It was decided that we were allowed to publish theses online as long as they were restricted to Texas State faculty, staff, and students. We worked with Atmire to customize our DSpace installation. We added a new security group called Affiliates, which is populated by users that successfully log in through Shibboleth federated authentication. Normally in DSpace, non-logged in users access resources through the anonymous user group. PDFs in DSpace for restricted theses have the anonymous group removed and the affiliates group added for read access. So here you see the PDF has only the affiliates group with read access. And this is the way the item record appears to a user that is not logged in. The download button for the PDF is missing. However, the abstract and citation are still available. A new box appears with instructions for accessing the PDF at the bottom and a link to a form for copyright owners to grant open access. And this is the form that users will see that they can provide open access for their theses. The theses were disbound, scanned, and uploaded in batches. Since excellent metadata already existed for the theses, at the time of scanning, the students would use MarcEdit to download a copy of the MARC record through Z39.50 from our catalog. An entire batch would be processed with scripts to crosswalk the MARC records into Dublin Core and package the files for upload to DSpace. And here's just part of the code for the crosswalking, and then here's part of the code for the packaging for the simple archive format. The zipped archives containing 25 theses and metadata would be uploaded into DSpace. The digital collections librarian keeps a separate record of what is uploaded into the repository in a spreadsheet. A new metadata field was created for restricted theses called affiliated. This will allow auditing to make sure restricted theses are not accidentally set with anonymous access at some point in the future. After batch upload, metadata is linked with DSpace concepts, which is DSpace method of authority control. ORCID IDs are added for authors when they exist. Here is the author concept view, and you can see the ORCID ID has been added. Lessons learned. So testing always as essential. When we added the login box initially, it was not going back after login through our two-factor authentication back to the item, so that had to be corrected. And most important, we found that smaller batches were easier to manage with DSpace, which is why we only work with batches of 25 theses. Other lessons are that if you build it, they will come. So by putting the citation and abstract in the repository led to requests for copies by non-Texas State affiliated users. The copyright officer determined that we could provide copies on an individual basis. And so here's some statistics of how many theses that we have uploaded currently. Almost 1,300. And at the bottom, you can see that we have had 15 requests from non-affiliated users to have the theses sent to them. and we will take questions afterwards. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Todd. Okay, so we are moving on to our fifth and final presentation. I'm going to hand it over to Bethany Scott.
Yes, let me share my screen. Okay. And I'll present. Okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Bethany Scott. I am the Digital Projects Coordinator at the University of Houston Libraries. And today I'm going to give y'all a quick demo of the integrated digital ecosystem that we have been developing and working on for the past few years. But first, I'll give a little background info to explain how we got to this point. So the UH Digital Library was originally launched in 2009. The goal was to provide global access to archival collections and to enrich student success, research, and teaching. And of course, at that time, we used Content DM to manage and provide access to all of these digital resources that we were creating. And the digital library has evolved over the years. So you can see here how the look and feel has been updated, particularly when we had new branding and theming across all the library's websites. But on the back end, it was still Content DM. And we eventually ran into limitations in navigation, discoverability, download and access controls, and the ability to automate our workflows. So we needed a new repository that could integrate seamlessly with our digital preservation storage and our archival finding aids. So we started the BC Dams project in 2016-2017. And we actually just opened up the new digital collections repository to public access earlier this year. So this is a perfect time to show y'all what we have accomplished up to this point. So hopefully live demo will work perfectly. So here's the new homepage for our digital collections repository. So first off, you'll notice that we changed the name of this system from Digital Library to Digital Collections. This is more in line with other institutions and should be easier for users to understand what they'll find when they come here. The homepage also features this big search box, which invites users to start their keyword searches. We also have full text search available for OCR text items. And then below the search box, we have a few browse options for these high-level categories of collections, images, text, and AV materials. So I'll start by browsing the images. And here you can see the interface for the search results. So by the top right here, we can have a few different sorting options. You can set how many results are displayed per page, and you can toggle back and forth between list view and this gallery view. In the list view, we can display a lot more information than we previously had in Content DM. So we have the title, the creator, the date, if there is one assigned to the item, the rights status, and the provenance information. All of this really helps users to figure out which items they want to view without having to do a lot of clicking back and forth. And then, of course, we have all of our facets in the left-hand column here. This is a big improvement too. We have twice as many facets as we did before. So we can get very specific with locating digital objects in the search results. And I'll go ahead and select a few for the demo. Let's see which one. Here we go. Okay, so when a user locates an item from the search results, this is what the item page looks like. So we have our large image viewer here on the left. This is a IIIF viewer, so the zoom and pan is really, really smooth. And we also have access to the IIIF manifest by clicking this icon here. And below the viewer, we have our download options. So this item's in copyright, so the small download is the only one that's available. Here's an example of an item that has all of the download options, a few different sizes, and then also the original file. And I'll go back here. So below the downloads, we have our right statement. So this links out to the rightstatements.org URI. So this is in line with DPLA and Europeana, which is really nice to have. And then next to the image viewer, we have all of our controlled value fields. So these are all of the fields that we have available as facets. And from here, we could click on any one of these controlled values and we would get the search results for everything in the repository that also has that term. We have a feedback button here. People can send us corrections, our permalink and social media sharing buttons. But the other thing that I really want to show is our integration with ArchiveSpace. So we click this link to view the item in the finding aid. And we go straight into the description of this item in the archival collection. So users can see the context of how the collection is organized with these series and subseries breadcrumbs, and then also through the hierarchy of the collection organization here. And also, if researchers started by looking at the finding aids, they could click on this digital object link to view the photo in the repository too. So it just goes seamlessly back and forth. And then on the back end, ArchiveSpace is managing the permalinks to the access version and the preservation version. So here's the digital object in the staff interface. You can see the access URI, and then here we have the preservation. So whenever an item is published in the digital collections repository or ingested into preservation storage, these file URIs are automatically updated so that we always know which objects belong together and we can click to go right to them. So with that, I'll go back to the slides. So our future work, okay, we are going to continue migrating. We have done just over 50% of our collections so far. And then eventually, of course, once we get to 100%, we will be sunsetting Content DM. And along the way, we want to do more usability testing and of course, always keep enhancing our features. Okay, and so here are the links to our systems and all of our task force and team members. And if you are interested in learning more about the project management that we use to develop all of this, I encourage everyone to come see our presentation in session 3L right after this. So thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. We lost that last bit. We lost your screen share. So I don't know if you wanted to put your last slide back up so everyone could see the links.
Oh,
when you back from the live demo.
Okay. Well, the slides will be in the Google Drive folder as well. So, you know, it'll be a clickable link in there, and then here they are.
Perfect. Okay, just want to make sure you have the opportunity to share that.
Okay, thank you.
Great. All right, thank you so much to all of our speakers. So we have about 12 minutes for Q&A. So if you have any questions for our speakers, please put them into the chat or feel free to unmute yourself and ask. They're ready for your questions.
I have a question for Sarah, since she's in my group. It's always pretty funny, but I haven't seen the research results you presented lately. Are open access policies more prevalent among non-land grant institutions than they are among land grant institutions? Or it's just not common anywhere?
Thank you, Bruce. Bruce reviewed the full paper, so he has an in-depth knowledge of this topic, not to mention the knowledge that you brought in. So we haven't looked at that yet, and that's one of the next stages that we're going to look at. So one of the things we're doing this summer is we're able to participate in this NSF-sponsored research experience for undergraduates program. Texas A&M has a site on, it's the Research Institute in Sociology and Social Inequality. So that's one of the things we're going to do through that research collaboration with social scientists is take a step back and look not just from the scope of land grants, what's happening with policies, but look at all institutional policies and ask, among other things, what's happening with land grants. So hopefully that next stage will let us make that assessment, because I think right now we can't say, is it more likely that there's policy adoption in land grants or public universities or private? And then we'd also like to bring in the Leiden rankings to get a better sense.
Yeah.
Because as we know, having an institutional policy doesn't necessarily mean, well, it never means that there's full open access. That hasn't happened. But does it mean that there's heightened open access? We'll be looking at that. Thank you for your question.
No worries. If you're not aware of what the Leiden rankings are, I'm going to put the link in the chat because we use it. I look at them quite a bit. They're quite interesting data.
Awesome, thanks.
That allows you to look at a whole bunch of different things about open access and other metrics and compare both regions and universities.
I was going to say, be sure to put it in the Whova chat and not the Zoom chat.
Right. Yes. Okay.
We have the.
You're right. And I sent Alexa the Leiden rankings. So let's.
While Bruce is taking care of that, we have a question from Jason for Bethany. Is your new system based on, I don't know what, Samvera Fedora? Am I saying that's not my area? But is that what your new system is based on?
Yes, it is a Samvera based repository. We used Hyrax as the starting point for the development and customization of the user interface from there, but that's the baseline.
And Bethany, I was playing around on your new site as you were speaking, and I just want to compliment University of Houston. I hate you guys because you're always so good. But I tried to do a Google search for one of your digital collections just to see how discoverable your system is. And you probably know this already, but it's the first link in Google, and I used generic terms. I just used historic Houston photographs, and your digital collection is the thing that pops up. Very nice.
Oh, great.
Nicely done.
I
Yes.
hadn't looked at that, but it's good to hear that.
Yeah, because you know, just general people are not going to know to go to an academic library and kind of search for. They're going to go into Google and just start typing keywords. And if your stuff is search engine optimized, then you'll really spread the wealth a lot better. So nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah, Juliana Barrera Gomez also said, congrats, Bethany and the UH Digital Collections team. The repository and your integration looks amazing. So congrats.
Thank you.
So we have 7 more minutes. Are there any other questions? I'm keeping an eye on the Whova chat. Bruce, I copied and pasted your link into the Whova chat so that
Thanks.
the attendees can see it.
I'd like to know how anybody could live in Houston before air conditioning. That's what I want to know. I'm always surprised at how big this city is.
I'm feeling the same way about San Antonio right now.
I feel that way about Texas in general.
Generally.
Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions. Last chance if you want to get a question into our presenters. All right, well then, thank you all so much for joining us today. I'd like to encourage everyone here to join the other TCDL sessions and to take a look at the poster presentations. Once we wrap up, if you hang around for 2 seconds, I will copy and paste some suggestions for other posters you might be interested in. I believe Alexa put all these suggestions together for the TCDL committee. So I will copy and paste that. Would also like to encourage you to participate in our poster scavenger hunt. I will also post a link to that in just a second. So again, thank you all for your presentations and for your attention. You all did a great job. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed everyone's presentations.